Namaskar to everybody. Thank you so much for making yourself present today for this very important conversation. I greet you all in the peaceful name of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, a man who's had an impact on many lives here today. And I think the start of this journey into the commemoration of 150 years of Gandhiji's philosophy is sharing our personal experiences of Gandhi and the impact and the influence that has had on us as people. I can think of no better person as Ella Gandhi to start that conversation off with. Of course, the granddaughter of Gandhiji. Ma'am, thank you so much for your time. I know it must be a very special time for you.
Gandhiji's influence has had a great impact on me and on many other people as well. But it's work in progress.
Yeah.
We're trying to attain some of the teachings, but it's slow, it's difficult, and it's work in progress.
You know, often when we talk about Gandhiji's legacy and what he's left behind, I think we do it in two ways. We do it in the present, how can we implement it now? And we do it in the future, how can we create that culture? I want to take it back several years to when you was just 6 years old, a little girl running around in India. And that's when you first met your grandfather. Talk to me about those experiences, because I wonder if we know much of it.
Yeah, I feel so privileged that my parents decided to go to India in around 1946-47 period. And at that time, we spent about 3 months in Gandhiji's ashram, Sevagram ashram, and then later in Pune at there was a sanatorium in Pune where I went with my mother and spent some time there with Gandhiji. So on both those occasions, I remember, getting this tremendous experience of being with Gandhiji. For me, as a little child, he was a grandfather, and he was a wonderful grandfather. He was very warm, very loving. I remember that when I was with him, his attention was entirely devoted to me. And he would listen to whatever I had to say. And when we came back in 1940, towards the end of 46 and beginning of 47, he wrote letters to me, 2 letters.
It was a difficult time for him, though. He was going through so much during that time. Of course, India walking toward independence. He wasn't happy about partition. And he writes you a letter.
Yes, he wrote me a letter. And when I think of it, so many of us would write to the adults, we would write to parents, and we would say, give our love to, the children, and that sort of thing. But no, Gandhiji wrote personally to me as a 6-year-old. And during that time, when he was so stressed, so busy. So it just shows, number one, the love that he had for us. And number two, the respect that he showed to little children in order to, to write to us. And to write to us, importantly, he told me that I should learn to observe silence. And when we think of it today, how important silence is. Because that is when you can contemplate, that is when you can think about what you're going to say, what you're going to do, how you're going to lead your life. All those things happen when you have a moment or a time of silence.
While we're talking about others here in that respect of how do you treat others, it also identifies very greatly with the self, meaning the way you treat others should be the way you would want to be treated. Because I think violence against another, according to Gandhian philosophy, is then tantamount to violence upon yourself. Help me understand that very important link.
Well, Gandhiji said that if you deal with violence, you end up at, having the whole world blind. if you treat other people with the same kind of violence as they treat you with. So to counteract violence, you have to have something different.
Yeah.
And that something different is compassion, it's empathy, it's love.
Many have written so many texts on this, that the world in a multimedia modern society is identifying more with the ego, and therefore it's easier to not care about the way you treat others. It's easier, it's becoming more commonplace to not spare thought about the impact your action has on another. It's all about you. Advice then?
I think a big lesson from Gandhiji was that, there's no quick fixes.
Yeah.
You can't expect things to just change overnight. It's a slow process. But a slow process at the end of the day is a more permanent or a more lasting process than the quick fix.
Yeah. I think this the first Satya Vaarta that we have on the occasion in the celebration of 150 years of Gandhian philosophy and Gandhiji. And on that note, one can then not distance this entire memory from truth. And I think globally there's this strong pursuit for truth, with many people wanting answers as to why they were wronged or why they had to suffer an injustice. And when you observe that, what do you think should be the mechanism to provide that truth?
Each person sees truth in their own, the way they would observe truth.
Yeah.
So the most important thing is for us to begin to understand how is it that you are, seeing the issue. When you're looking at the truth, what aspect are you looking at? So to understand you, I have to have that, ability, and also, just inclination.
And again, back to the sentimentality of it, because I think the point of the Satyavarta is to understand the life experiences that people have taken from Gandhiji. Draw on one for me, one that was very special for you.
I think the most important thing for me, even as a little child, was that, Gandhiji was very, very courageous and fearless. And, that was an important point which sort of helped me during the years of our struggle to say that no matter what happens, we have to go on fighting for justice. Yeah.
Well, Ms. Ella Gandhi, thanks so much for enlightening us on that and reminding us about this beautiful point, the courage behind Satyagraha. I think is a great lesson we take today. And of course, sharing those close memories. I'd love to read that letter sometime. And wish you all the best as you continue to take this legacy forward, share it with the world, and I think uphold it.
I just wanted to assure Ela, as member of the family, that we go through these cycles, as it were, and it can be very depressing when Gandhi is criticized and non-violence is criticized, and that it's not a soft option. And just her response to that. The other is a question. You don't have to answer it, but there's so much written on Gandhi over the decades. And the scholarship on Gandhi has not waned, it has increased. And the scholarship's also quite controversial. I'm not just thinking of South Africa, but across. But in the end, do you feel you need to follow this trajectory of Gandhian criticism?
Gandhiji, spoke about the whole concept of passive resistance. He's written, on that quite lengthily, because he believed that when we use the word passive resistance and the way people perceive passive resistance is that, there's a minority of people who are weak and they don't have the power that the majority has, and therefore they opt for passive resistance. But Gandhiji said, no, that's not the reason. Actually, satyagraha requires far more courage than violence requires. And satyagraha, or soul force, is the force that can help people to change. International pressure on South Africa was, one of the pillars that actually brought South Africa to the table. Had there not been that international pressure, we might still be with apartheid. So there was that international pressure, which was a peaceful way of applying pressure, of saying to them that negotiate, otherwise we are not going to support you. And that is satyagraha. So satyagraha has many dimensions, and one needs to look at those dimensions. The second thing about the criticism, most of the people who have criticized Gandhi as a human being. They haven't criticized because they don't have a proper or any argument to say that nonviolence is bad, that you shouldn't practice nonviolence. I haven't seen anyone saying that. They may say that violence is better, but they won't say that nonviolence is bad. And there's a difference between the two.
Not one single word formed the basis of partition. Partition itself, the final word has never been spoken. Not by Nehru, not by Vallabhbhai Patel, not by Rajagopalachari, none of them. None of them were able to speak the absolute truth to confirm that partition was possible.
Your thoughts on that partition and the journey it took through that time?
There is historic evidence that India was one. It was always together. There were no two different, countries. It was one continent. But during that time, there were lots of influences, maybe untruths, maybe, I'm not sure what we have seen the film recently that was brought out. I can't remember the name, but it was about how partition took place. So there are many theories and many, historical sort of evidence and facts that have been put forward about how it happened. But the truth is that the violence that took place and the many, negotiations that Gandhiji was involved in, he wasn't happy about partition at all. And it is true that when there was, this violence taking place, the British Army was not successful in stopping the violence. They themselves have claimed that one person was able to stop the violence when the whole entire British Army couldn't stop it. And this has been recorded. It's a historic fact that he managed to stop that violence.
We'd like to thank you so much for being a part of this conversation, a very sentimental time to have people listen to this engagement. I think it's the greatest way to take the message of Satyagraha and Gandhi's philosophy forward, because if you tell somebody else about this, then I think they'll do the same, and eventually the whole world becomes one big happy family of peace, truth, and justice. So thank you very much for your time.